For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Shannon de Rehove. Criminologist Lisa Grobler joins me to discuss her book Crossing the Line, about police officers who become criminals. Crossing the Line has been described as a book of great significance in South Africa. Why did you write the book, and what do you hope readers will gain from it?
The book was born out of my PhD, all right. And what happened was last year, July, we had masses of gang wars again and problems on the Cape Flats, as is happening right now. And the community kept going to the police management and saying, but there are cops involved with the gangs, all right? And the police management kept saying, bring us the evidence, which is a fundamental policing function. Police must find the evidence, not the community. Anyway, so of course the community is not going to go to their local police station and report a corrupt cop to a corrupt cop. So I decided I'm sitting with all this information out of my PhD, so I wrote a piece for the Cape Times, for the Insight section, and explaining exactly how the symbiotic relationship works between cops and criminals, gangsters particularly. And they printed it, and it just caught fire in the media. And Jacana got hold of it and said, wouldn't I like to convert my PhD into a book? And that's how it came about. What I really hope to achieve by it is to get the South African public educated in terms of police criminality. They've always been drip-fed. You know, in the newspapers every second day or so you'll see the sergeant's been arrested, this captain's been arrested, and that's it. There's been no in-depth publication besides NGOs and academia on police corruption. And this book I hope to reach every South African so they can understand that if a policeman comes to them and says, give me something, I'm thirsty, or give me a cool drink, it's not because they're thirsty, it's because they're on the take. That little nuances like that. Yeah, it's to understand it. It's an in-depth look at the phenomenon.
Your book includes a focus on policing problems in New South Wales, London and New York. What lessons do you draw from such comparative experiences?
Okay, the reason I chose those particular agencies was because they also have a community-focused policing model, like we have. And most importantly, all three of them have had their scandals and they did something about it. And that was where we could learn from what's happened in those agencies. Now, in the NYPD, they've already had 2 commissions of inquiry into police corruption. And out of those came interventions that needed to be put in place. So it's something you're never ever going to get rid of. It's sort of endemic to policing agencies all over the world, corruption. But at least they've got measures to try and reduce it and to manage it. And the Met in London, they didn't go the Commission of Inquiry route, which Australia did. New South Wales did, also had a Commission of Inquiry, the Wood Commission. What the Brits did in London was they set up something called a ghost squad, which was ingenious. They took a handful of cops out of the police altogether. So on paper they didn't exist in the police service anymore. They weren't on the payroll. They did not exist. They'd left the police, effectively. And they formed a unit and went undercover and investigated thoroughly who was corrupt, who was doing the corrupting, which is equally important. And they built up the cases. They didn't actually go to court. They took the information they had and they took it to a unit in the Met to investigate and to take to court. And it was hugely successful. But again, controversial. The deputy commissioner of the Met at the time that I interviewed, he was the one that was desperately concerned about the situation then. I think it was the 80s. And his superiors said to him, are you crazy? You know, what could come out of this? Because policing agencies don't like scandals. They don't. All right. So he said, no, look, it's got to be done. So he wasn't very popular. But it got results, and they got rid of a whole lot of little police syndicates that were doing drugs and all sorts of things. So that was hugely effective. So all of them have, that's why those agencies were so important for me. It is what we could do in South Africa to try and help the situation improve.
What types of crime do South African police service members commit? How can this be prevented?
Basically, there isn't a crime on the statute books that they're not involved in. They are involved in everything, and the there's quite a big section in the book on illustrations. In other words, what crimes they're involved in. And it ranges from everything to what I just call the bread and butter crimes, like your bribery and corruption. That's very common. Informer fraud, general fraud, sabotaging prosecutions. They do that by lying on the stand, perjury, trashing dockets, not telling witnesses when they should be in court. There's loads of ways of doing that. And then they're involved in serious stuff like rape is a big problem, murder, armed robbery, and of course their involvement with syndicates and gangs, also a problem. So yeah, there is not a crime they're not involved in.
How can these be prevented?
Based on the agencies that I have interviewed, what they do is, firstly, whistleblowers must be protected. SAPS whistleblowers are not protected. I know of at least 3 cops recently that lost their jobs for blowing the whistle on problems within the SAPS, and they've all 3 lost them under the guise of going through the wrong channels. And in most cases, they do go to their superiors first, they get ignored, and then they go to some other medium, and like the media or whatever, and then they get fired. Right? It doesn't seem to be about the problem. It's about exposing it, and that is our biggest problem here, is this trying to avoid a scandal. Right, drug testing should happen. SAPS is very hesitant to do that because of, the whole human rights issue. But they do it at the NYPD. The head of the Internal Affairs Bureau has been tested something like, 500 times in his career, just completely randomly. But it has to happen because SAPS has got a significant substance abuse problem amongst its personnel. They really are just a microcosm of our society.
Of course.
So, but then again, that's not being done. I know that there is help for cops that are addicted to drugs or alcohol if they say so, but very few of them want to come out with that because then they might get stuck behind a desk for the rest of their career or something, so they're not too keen to come out with it. We need a good anti-corruption policy strategy. There's been one on the table since 1999 in different forms under different names, but it's still not implemented because it doesn't really have buy-in from senior management, and we need that. And then the one thing that all 3 of those agencies do too is integrity testing. We don't have anything like that. I remember talking to a senior police manager and saying, you need surveillance, you need audio surveillance, you need visual surveillance in order to do these tests. And the first thing he said was, oh no, we can't visually surveil anybody. So it's just, the will is just not there to do anything. But anyway, there are 2 types of integrity tests. You've got your random tests. They're done by specialized units, and they include prosecutors to avoid entrapment. So random, they would pick cops randomly and set up situations where they might compromise themselves. All right, so they'll be, if they do compromise themselves and they do something, they will be on camera, and they will be prosecuted. Then you get the targeted integrity tests, where there's information that somebody is involved in corruption, and then they will do the similar thing. They will create a scenario and give him the opportunity to prove them right or wrong. So those are extremely effective. Lifestyle surveillance is another one. There's a part in the book of junior policemen getting to work in really, really expensive cars and living the high life, never short of booze or whatever. And then the managers getting to the same police station in these old crocky cars and things, and nobody questions them. Nobody says, where do you get the money to do this? So lifestyle surveillance is very important. So is behavioral profiling. You will find that many cops who've got lots of complaints against them, say for example for assault, are usually involved in other forms of criminality as well. So things like complaints should be tracked just to make sure that there isn't something else going on. And just to professionalize the service. The service discipline is very poor, professionalism is very poor. Getting in the right recruits, doing the correct vetting and all that sort of thing to try and just your quality of recruits, getting better recruits into the police. It's very important.
What are the main risk factors that contribute to the phenomenon of police criminality?
Okay, now what my study found was there are 4 main categories that enable and contribute to police crime. The first one is individual facts. All right. So it'll be things like, what sort of person are you? You know, do you have low morals? You know, can you be easily compromised? Do you have financial problems? Do you have addiction problems? Are you greedy? Would you easily be swayed by temptation? That sort of thing. So it's your individual personal characteristics that very often give rise to something called the slippery slope theory that we refer to quite a lot, where a policeman goes into the police, but with every intention of doing what he should be doing and serving the community and upholding the law and everything else. And then one day he gets given something by a thankful citizen, and that's how it starts. So through the process of moral redefinition, he starts thinking, oh, well, this is okay. Oh, that was quite nice. Let me, try something a little bigger. And eventually, before they know it, they're totally out of control and involved in big things. So those characteristics are important. The second category was the task environment, the work the police do. All right, it involves a lot of power, so that gets abused, can be abused on every level. And opportunity. I mean, they've got, if you want to be criminal in that organization, you've got loads of opportunity. And of course, trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, that sort of thing plays a big part. It's led to a lot of cops committing murder, family murders, alcohol abuse, domestic violence. That's usually how that plays itself out, because in the SAPS there's no compulsory debriefing. In fact, studies have shown that 90% of SAPS members who have been wounded in action or hurt in action suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. So you've got a lot of loose cannons out there wandering around. They need to pull their socks up on that one too, and have compulsory debriefing in certain situations. Then you've got your police culture, which is universal. It's things like the Blue Code of Silence. If you know your friend is corrupt, you do not go and tell anybody. You just what SAPS members tend to do is to turn a blind eye, mostly, because first of all it protects them. It can be very dangerous. I mean, we've had stories quite often of colleagues being taken out trying to while they were investigating colleagues. Things like the us versus them mentality is, they feel that the communities don't support them and the communities are the enemy. The public out there is the enemy, so they pull together more as a group. Things like ostracism they try and avoid, because if you do speak out against corrupt cops, you get ostracized. It's quite common. And then of course, just the machismo, the whole sort of arrogance thing, and heavy drinking and womanizing, and all those aspects of police culture contribute. And then the last categories are the organizational aspects. So the organization itself, for example, the quality of the management of the SAPS, which in the study has come out very badly, very poor leadership. And the one example I always give is, as an interviewee said, many policemen get promoted according to the Peter principle, which means you get promoted to the level of incompetence. So you might be a good sergeant, okay, and you do your job perfectly. You might be a good warrant officer, you do your job perfectly. You get to a captain, you don't know what you're doing. And on the other hand, you'll get police who promoted to commissioned officer level, which is captain, without going on an officer's course. Now, you have to go on an officer's course before you get promoted to commissioned officer. So what happens is they promote somebody to captain, they go on, eventually they've got the promotion, they go on the course, they're completely unsuited to that position and they cannot be demoted. So they become really, really poor leaders and poor managers. And all of that sort of results in poor supervision, which opens up huge opportunities again for cops to carry on being corrupt or start being corrupt or whatever. So yeah, your management is extremely important, and that is one area where SAPS really, they need to start from the top down, bottom up, whatever, and try and fix it. Salaries is also another thing that always comes up. People are always saying, you know, the police are hectically underpaid, that's why they do it. Is it greed or is it need? That dichotomy always comes up. But if you look at the interviews and the amount of people I spoke to, it's a 50-50 division. 50% say, yes, they are underpaid. Another 50% will say, no, their wages are adequate, they've got to learn to live within their means. And the one guy actually said they're completely overpaid for their output. So salaries have always been contentious.
Police corruption and criminality occurs the world over, with the only variable being the extent and determination of leaders to deal with the problem. Where does South Africa rank in the world of corruption among police officers?
To the best of my knowledge, there's no sort of police corruption ranking universally or internationally. To the best of my knowledge, I haven't come across something like that. But what there is a lot of surveys on perceptions of corruption. And in a recent survey that was done in South Africa on government agencies generally and corruption in government agencies, the police came out tops. Number one, were perceived to be the most corrupt government agency, and it was something like 63% of South Africans thought that they were the most corrupt. So in the public's eye, they're not looking good.
What work are you currently involved with in correctional services?
What I do for them is I do risk assessments on not all parolees, because I mean it's like a sausage machine. They come up every day at parole hearings. So what they do is if they get a tricky case or a high profile case or cases that they're not sure about, they will ask me to do a risk assessment on these offenders. And so I do it within the criminological framework. I will assess their risk. And what a lot of people don't know is that I have to do it for nothing. Because corrections, who desperately need criminologists, don't have a budget for criminologists. So if I want to do the work I want to do, which is what I'm doing, I have to do it for nothing. Regional office, I work with fantastic guys, and they try their best to get funding, but it's controlled by a head office, and they clearly don't have a clue, A, what criminologists do, the ones who have to make the finance decisions, and B, they clearly don't understand the value of this kind of work. And I think there are only 6 of us in the country that do this, and the others are all affiliated with universities. So they don't have to worry about wages or getting paid. For me, I've got to do it just for love of what I do.
Can readers expect future books from you?
Well, I always say it depends on this project, on the success of this project. But yes, I have 2 very definite themes in mind, which are both going to take a lot of research. The first one is I want to get under the skin of our high crime rate in South Africa, but I want to do it from an offender's perspective. Almost purely. Now I know already that's going to be hugely controversial, because the public's going to say, why do you want their voice? But they're the ones doing this, and nobody seems to be able to tell us why they're doing it. So that's what I'm going to concentrate on. And then the other one is corruption in the courts. That is something that, to the best of my knowledge, has not even been studied in this country. And I do believe that there is a problem there too, definitely, across the board. So, yeah, those are the 2 that will be keeping me busy in the next while.
Thank you for your time. That was criminologist Lize Grobler.